Uncle said the will was burned, but I saved a piece, the little girl whispered, and the Caruso library went so still that the grandfather clock sounded like it was counting everyone's guilt. Willow Reed stood half-hidden behind a brown leather wingback chair, small enough that the tall back nearly swallowed her from view, with one ash-stained hand closed around a folded handkerchief. She was 5 years old, wearing the dark blue dress her mother had pressed before the funeral, and the white ribbon in her hair had slipped loose near one ear. No one had noticed the maid's little girl standing there until she opened her fist. Inside the small handkerchief lay a burned scrap of paper no bigger than a playing card, its edges black, curled, and brittle, with a brown smoke stain cutting across one corner. Across the room, Raymond Sloane, the Caruso family attorney, had just placed a clean white will on the long oak table and called it the final legal document. The paper looked too perfect for a dead man's last wishes. It had no old folds, no wax pressure, no ribbon mark, no smell of storage, no history sitting on it. Leo Caruso stood beside the cold fireplace in his black funeral suit, his gold family signet ring catching the gray afternoon light, his father's old pocket watch tucked into his vest, and his white handkerchief with the black border folded in his jacket. Funeral flowers still lined the hallway outside, but inside the library the air smelled like leather, old wood, candle wax, and something faintly burned. Leo had come to hear what the dead had left behind. Instead, a child had just said the true will had been destroyed. Uncle Victor Caruso moved first. He did not ask Willow where she found the scrap. He did not ask what words were still on it. He stepped toward her with the soft face of a man trying very hard to look safe. "That is fireplace ash, sweetheart," Victor said. "Give it here before you dirty your hands more." Willow closed her fist again. The movement was tiny, but it changed the room. Council members shifted in their chairs. Nina Vale, Raymond's law office clerk, pressed a gray folder tighter against her chest. Raymond placed one hand near the clean will, not covering it, not protecting it, but close enough for Leo to notice. "Mr. Caruso," Raymond said, "this is an emotional day. A child may have found old fireplace waste. It should not interrupt a formal reading." Victor nodded with tired dignity, as if he alone was trying to keep grief from becoming chaos. "Leo, everyone is exhausted. Do not let a confused child turn ash into an accusation." Willow looked at Leo then, not at Victor, not at Raymond. Her lower lip trembled once, but she did not cry. "I did not steal it," she whispered. "The fire dropped it." The word steal made Leo's eyes sharpen. No one had accused her out loud yet. That meant someone in the room had already expected the accusation to be useful. Leo stepped away from the fireplace, but not quickly enough to frighten her. "Open your hand again," he said. Willow looked at Victor first, and Leo saw fear pass across her face like a shadow. So he took the white handkerchief with the black border from his jacket pocket and laid it flat on the edge of the table. "You do not have to give it to him," Leo said. "Place it there, where everyone can see it." Willow took one careful step from behind the chair. The old floor gave a soft creak under her shoe. Victor reached out as if to guide her, but Leo's voice cut across the movement. "Do not touch her." Victor's hand stopped in the air, then lowered slowly. Willow placed her handkerchief on top of Leo's and unfolded it with 2 careful fingers. The burned scrap opened just enough to reveal a dark red patch clinging to the lower edge, half melted and half preserved. Victor's eyes went straight to that mark before Willow finished spreading the cloth. He did not look at the words. He did not look at the ash. He looked at the wax. Leo saw it. Raymond saw Leo see it. Nina looked down at her gray folder. The silence held for 3 slow ticks of the grandfather clock. Leo leaned closer without touching the paper. There were letters under the smoke stain, broken and dark, but not gone. He did not know yet what the scrap proved. He only knew Victor had recognized the dangerous part before anyone else had read a word. Leo straightened, his face colder than the fireplace behind him. "If it is ash, Victor," he said, "why did you reach for it before anyone read it?" Victor Caruso let Leo's question hang over the oak table for one careful breath, then another, as if silence itself could be trained to protect him. He lowered his hand and gave the room a tired smile, the kind older men used when they wanted suspicion to feel impolite. Because she is 5 years old, Leo, he said. Because ash stains, paper cuts, and grief can make small things look larger than they are. Raymond Sloane moved beside the clean will, his fingertips resting near the bottom edge of the paper as if the document needed protection from the burned one. Mr. Caruso, with respect, the formal reading should not be delayed by fireplace waste. The paper before the council has been prepared through proper channels. Nina Vale nodded from behind him, the gray folder still pressed flat against her chest. It is most likely draft waste, she said, then swallowed as if the words had come out faster than she intended. Willow stood close to Leo's handkerchief, her small shoulders curved inward, her eyes fixed on the burned scrap as though the adults might make it disappear if she blinked. Leo did not look away from Nina. Draft waste, he repeated. That sounds very ready for something no one has examined. Raymond's expression stayed smooth. Law offices handle many drafts. Staff misunderstand documents. Children repeat pieces of adult conversations. None of that changes the fact that this will has been verified for reading. The word staff moved through the library like cold air under a locked door. Victor turned toward the service entrance. Where is Grace Reed? He asked. If Willow has been wandering through a private family matter, her mother should explain. A few council members shifted in their chairs with the quiet relief of people glad to see blame walk toward someone with less power. Grace Reed appeared in the doorway moments later, wearing a plain black dress and low shoes, her hair pinned neatly, a faint line of dust still on one sleeve from the hall table arrangements after the funeral. She stopped beside the low bookcase where she usually polished the lower shelves. She did not step onto the center rug. She did not approach the table. The room had trained her for years to know where her body was allowed to be. Willow turned at once. Mama, I did not take it, she whispered. Grace looked at the ash on her daughter's fingers, then at the burned paper on Leo's handkerchief, then at the adults who were already deciding what kind of woman she must be. I know, baby. Raymond cleared his throat. Miss Reed, your daughter appears to have removed material from the fireplace and connected it to estate documents. Did you speak to her about the will? Grace's face did not harden. Settled, quiet and steady. I told my daughter not to touch what is not hers. I also told her not to let grown people scare the truth out of her hands. Victor gave a soft, disappointed sigh. Grace, no one is scaring anyone. But you have worked in this house long enough to know the library, the family habits, the safe, and the private rooms. It is possible Willow overheard something and built a story around it. Grace looked at him then. I know where the dust gathers in this room. That does not mean I know where your family hides its truth. A chair creaked near the council table. Nina looked down at the gray folder. Raymond's eyes narrowed just enough for Leo to see. This is exactly why procedure matters, Raymond said. Staff interference, even unintentional, can complicate estate administration. Leo turned his head slowly. Staff interference. A 5-year-old places ash on a handkerchief, and before anyone tests the paper, you already have a legal phrase for blaming her mother. Victor raised both hands slightly, his face still wearing sorrow like a tailored coat. Leo, you are exhausted. We all are. Your family needs stability, not accusations built on a maid's child and a burned scrap. Willow flinched at the words maid's child, but she did not step away from the table. She curled her fingers in front of her dress and whispered, Mama did not take it. The fire dropped it. Leo heard the sentence differently now, not as panic, as sequence, as a child describing the only part she truly understood. He looked toward the cold fireplace, where a faint gray powder still rested along the lower stones. No one cleans that hearth, he said. Raymond straightened. Mr. Caruso, this is unnecessary. No, Leo said. What is unnecessary is how quickly everyone in this room decided the child was confused and the mother was useful to blame. Grace kept one hand near Willow's shoulder without squeezing, careful not to make comfort look like coaching. Victor's voice lowered. You would stop the final reading over ash? Leo glanced at the clean will, smooth and white on the oak table, then at the burned scrap lying on black-bordered linen. I am stopping it because a perfect document is asking me to ignore an imperfect one. Willow leaned closer to Grace and pointed with one careful finger toward the dark red mark on the burned edge. It had the lion, she said. Before the fire ate the rest. Raymond became still. Victor's eyes flicked, almost invisibly, toward the high shelf where an old seal box sat behind glass. At the back of the room, Malcolm Voss, the retired house steward who had served 3 generations of Carusos, slowly lifted his head. Leo saw all 3 reactions and placed his father's pocket watch on the table beside the scrap. Then we start with the lion, he said. Malcolm Voss did not step forward until Leo Caruso looked at him, and even then the old house steward moved with the caution of a man who knew that family rules became dangerous when powerful people were forced to remember them. He had served the Caruso house for 34 years, long enough to know which silver drawer stuck in winter, which portrait hid the wall safe, which keys were ceremonial, and which documents were never supposed to leave the archive without 2 witnesses. His eyes stayed on the dark red mark clinging to the burned scrap. The lion seal is not decoration, Malcolm said quietly. Raymond Sloane gave him a thin professional smile. Symbols appear on many family papers, Mr. Voss. Invitations, memorial cards, old envelopes. A child may not understand the difference. Willow Reed stood beside Grace with both hands folded tightly in front of her dress now. That the scrap lay on Leo's handkerchief. The ash beneath her fingernails made her fingers look even smaller. She looked from Malcolm to the paper and whispered, "It was stuck to the bottom, like melted candy." No one laughed. Victor Caruso folded his hands in front of him and let his face settle into patient sadness. "Leo, this is exactly how grief becomes theater. We are studying fireplace trash while your family waits to hear your father's final wishes." Leo did not answer him. He leaned closer to the scrap without touching it. The burned edges curled inward, but the center had survived in narrow islands of cream paper, smoke gray and fragile. Under the dark red wax, part of a lion's head remained, pressed deep enough that the shape still held after the fire. Beside it, nearly swallowed by soot, a broken line of blue ink showed through. Estate guardian and protector, Grace Ree. Grace saw her own name before anyone said it. Her shoulders moved back as if the words had reached across the table and touched her. Willow pointed carefully, stopping her finger above the paper without touching it. "That is Mama's tall G," she said. "The one she makes on my birthday cards." Leo went pale, not from fear, but from the sudden cold understanding that the room had been trying to bury a woman who was still standing in it. Grace Reed's name did not belong on random draft waste. It did not belong inside a story about a confused child. It belonged somewhere someone had worked very hard to burn. Raymond adjusted the clean will on the table. A partial phrase has no legal meaning without context. Guardian could refer to household care. Protector could be ceremonial language. Grace Ree could be the beginning of many names. Leo looked at him. "Then why is it on paper wearing the Caruso seal?" Victor answered before Raymond could. "The seal may have transferred from an old envelope. Papers stick together. Wax breaks. This is an old house." Malcolm's cane tapped the floor once. "No, sir." Victor's eyes sharpened. "Careful." Malcolm did not look away from Leo. Drafts were initialed. Copies were stamped. Final sealed instruments were waxed with the lion, bound with black ribbon, and logged in the family registry. Your grandfather made that rule after the Chicago dispute. The seal on that fragment is not from an invitation. It is from a sealed instrument. The word instrument changed the room. Nina Vale looked down at the gray folder against her chest. Raymond's thumb pressed against the table edge. Victor's gaze flicked, fast and unwilling, toward the high shelf where an old glass-front seal box sat above the archive cabinet. Leo saw the glance. So did Malcolm. Willow only saw that the adults had gone quiet again, and she moved closer to Grace's skirt. Leo lifted his eyes to Raymond's clean document. It was bright, flat, and untouched, as if it had never carried wax, ribbon, pressure, or age. Show me the seal impression on the will you brought, Leo said. Raymond paused for less than a second. This is a formal reading copy. Show me the impression. Raymond did not move. Leo's voice stayed calm. A draft does not wear the Caruso seal, and a final Caruso will does not arrive without one. Grace drew a breath, then stopped herself, as if even breathing too loudly near family papers might be used against her. Willow looked up at Leo. I did not know it was important, she said. I just thought paper with Mama's name should not be on the floor. That sentence did what no accusation had done. It made the council members look away. Leo took his father's pocket watch from his vest and placed it beside the burned scrap. The small click of metal on would sounded like a decision. Lock the library doors, he said. No one leaves. No one cleans the fireplace. No one touches the clean will. Victor's mouth tightened. Raymond began to speak, but Leo looked toward Malcolm. Bring the registry book from the archive drawer. If this paper is lying, the registry will prove it. If the clean will is lying, the registry will prove that too. The library doors closed one after the other, and the sound was soft enough that it should not have frightened anyone. Yet Willow's small hand found the side of Grace's dress and stayed there. Leo Caruso did not ask the child another question. He had seen enough adults try to turn her fear into confusion, and he would not give them another chance. Malcolm Voss crossed to the archive cabinet beneath the high shelf, moving slowly because the old lock had always resisted being hurried. He took a brass key from his vest, opened the lower drawer, and lifted out a thick black registry book with worn corners and a faded ribbon marker. Dust rose when he placed it on the oak table, but no one commented. The burned scrap still rested on Leo's white handkerchief beside the pocket watch, and the clean will still sat near Raymond Sloane's hand, bright and flat as if it had never passed through history. Malcolm opened the registry book to the final marked page. Final sealed instrument, he read, his voice steady but lower than before. Caruso estate transition.
Leon Vatzel.
Black mourning ribbon. Lower right embossed registry number. Logged 2 days before the service. Leo looked at Raymond's document. Show me the black ribbon mark. Raymond's expression remained composed. A reading copy may not show ceremonial binding. Malcolm shook his head. Not ceremonial. Identification. Leo's eyes did not leave Raymond. Show me the embossed registry number. Raymond did not move. The clean will had no mark in the lower right corner. No pressure where a seal had pressed into paper. No faint shadow where ribbon had held pages closed. It looked perfect because nothing real had ever weighed on it. Willow tugged once at Grace's skirt, then pointed toward the fireplace with the careful seriousness of a child who knew adults only believed small things when they could see them. There is black string in the rocks, she whispered. Everyone followed her finger to the stone seam beneath the cold hearth. At first, it looked like a bit of soot caught in a crack. Then Leo saw the curled end of a black ribbon, burned short and trapped where a brush had missed it. Grace placed a gentle hand over Willow's shoulder before the child could step closer. Leo turned to Malcolm. Was this fireplace used today? Malcolm's mouth tightened. It was not supposed to be used at all, sir. The ventilation repair was scheduled after the service. I placed the maintenance notice inside the hearth screen this morning. Victor gave a slow, disappointed breath. There were people in and out all day. Someone may have lit it without understanding. Leo looked at the fresh gray powder along the grate. During a funeral, in a private library, under a maintenance notice. Raymond stepped in smoothly. Old ribbon, old ash, old family seals. These things gather in houses like this. None of this proves the fragment came from the controlling will. Willow shook her head. It popped. Her voice was tiny, but it made Raymond stop. The fire made a pop and the little paper jumped out. The black string was stuck to it before it fell. Malcolm leaned over the hearth without touching anything. The ribbon end is fresh burned. Leo looked to the guard near the door. Photograph it. Do not remove it. Then he turned back to Raymond. The man who brought the paper does not get to prove the paper. Raymond's eyes cooled. Then who does? Marin Shaw, Leo said. Independent document examiner. Call her now. Nina Vale shifted behind Raymond, and the gray folder bent under her grip. But the scan already showed it was only a draft, she said, then froze as if her own words had turned around and faced her. No one had mentioned a scan. Raymond did not look at her, which made the silence worse. Victor's hand stopped against his sleeve. Willow looked up at Grace. What scan? Leo's face went colder than the fireplace. He looked at the registry book, the burned ribbon, the clean will, and the ash still caught beneath a child's fingernails. Yes, he said quietly. What scan, Miss Vale? Marin Shaw arrived 23 minutes later with a hard black case, a sealed light kit, and the kind of silence that made polished people stop pretending. She did not ask Raymond Sloan what he believed the document was. She did not ask Victor Caruso why he had reached for the scrap. She looked first at the closed library doors, then at the cold fireplace, the registry book, the clean will, the burned ribbon still caught in the stone seam, and finally at the small piece of paper resting on Leo's white handkerchief with the black border. Has anyone touched the fragment since the child placed it there? She asked. Leo answered. No. Willow Reed stood close to Grace with both hands folded in front of her dress, the ash still tucked beneath her tiny fingernails like proof her body had carried too long. Marin set out gloves, a ruler, a camera, a magnifying lens, clear evidence sleeves, and a narrow-angled lamp. Every movement was slow enough for the room to understand that this was no longer family conversation. This was record. Burned fragment, Marin said as the camera clicked. Partial red wax residue. Blue ink. Smoke damage. Lower edge intact enough for pressure review. Raymond's mouth tightened at the word pressure. Victor looked toward the windows, as if boredom could make him innocent. Nina Vale stood behind Raymond with the gray folder pressed to her chest, now bent slightly at one corner from her grip. Marin examined the clean will next. She did not frown. She did not accuse it. She treated the paper gently, and that made the inspection colder. No visible wax pressure, she said. Not even compression. No embossed registry number in the expected lower right corner. Signature field unusually clean. Raymond stepped in at once. A reading copy may differ from a sealed archival instrument. Malcolm Voss looked at Leo. Not when it is presented as the controlling document, sir. Marin moved the angled lamp over the burned scrap. The light slid across the damaged surface, catching tiny ridges under the soot. Slowly, a pressed number appeared in the lower right corner, not written in ink, but pushed into the paper itself. Malcolm opened the registry book and placed one finger beside the final entry without touching the scrap. Same number, he said. The library went still again, but this stillness was different. Earlier, they had been quiet because they did not know what Willow held. Now they were quiet because they were beginning to know. Willow leaned forward, squinting at the faded blue writing near the burned middle. Mama, she whispered. That is your tall G. Marin adjusted the light. More words rose from the smoke-dark paper, broken at the edges but clear through the center. Grace Reed shall hold emergency estate guardianship during transition. Grace made a small sound and covered her mouth with one hand. She did not reach for the paper. She had spent too many years in that room learning not to touch what belonged to the family. But her name was there, written where no one in the room had expected it to survive. Leo's face went pale, not with weakness, but with the cold shock of understanding what the clean will had erased. Victor moved smoothly, his voice full of regret. Estate guardianship can mean household care, temporary arrangements, staff responsibilities. It does not give a maid authority over Caruso assets. Raymond nodded quickly. Correct. Without the full page, context is missing. This fragment is not enough to override the prepared document. Leo did not look away from Grace's name. Then why is her name missing entirely from your prepared document? Raymond answered too late. Because the prepared document reflects the final legal intent. Marin looked up from the clean will. The fragment paper, ink composition, wax residue, fold pattern, and embossed registry number are consistent with the sealed instrument described in the Caruso registry. The document Mr. Sloane presented is not consistent with those physical markers. Raymond's voice sharpened. Preliminary. Marin nodded. Preliminary does not mean imaginary. Willow reached for two of Grace's fingers, holding them as if her mother was the one who needed help standing. Leo saw that and understood the cruelty of the room more clearly than before. A child had brought ash to the table because adults with titles had tried to erase a woman who spent years dusting that same table. Marin returned to the clean will, lowering the lamp until the flat printed seal showed under the light. There is something else, she said. The seal image on this document is flat. It appears reproduced from a scan, not pressed from wax. Nina closed her eyes for half a second. Raymond went completely still. Leo turned toward the gray folder in the clerk's arms. Now, he said, we talk about the scan. The word scan changed the room because it should not have been there yet. Marin Shaw had not asked for office records. Leo Caruso had not mentioned digital files. Malcolm Voss had only opened the registry book, and Willow Reed had only pointed to the black ribbon caught in the stones. Yet Nina Vale had spoken as if someone had already examined the burned truth before anyone in the library was supposed to know it existed. Leo turned toward her slowly, and Nina pressed the gray folder closer to her chest. Miss Vale, he said, you knew about a scan before anyone here requested one. Raymond Sloane stepped in at once. My office scans many documents. She misspoke. Leo did not look at him. Then she can explain which document she meant. Nina looked at Raymond first, and that was the mistake. It did not prove everything, but it showed where fear expected permission to come from. Victor Caruso gave a soft sigh near the windows, his face arranged into patient sorrow. Leo, clerks repeat office language all the time. After a funeral, files move quickly. Do not turn confusion into conspiracy. Grace Reed stood behind Willow with one hand resting lightly on her daughter's shoulder. Willow had stopped watching the adults and was looking at her own fingers, where ash sat dark under her small nails. Leo saw it and raised one hand before anyone could make the child explain adult paperwork again. Willow is done answering questions, he said. Now the adults will explain themselves. Marin requested read-only access to Raymond's estate transfer log through the independent attorney. Raymond objected, saying firm systems were confidential and could not be opened inside a family library, but Leo had already placed the call under emergency estate preservation. The request went through with the council members, Malcolm, Marin, Grace's attorney, and 2 staff witnesses present. No one touched the burned fragment. No one moved the clean will. The first log appeared on a secure tablet minutes later. At 12:46 in the morning, after the funeral guests had left, a file had been created under the name Caruso sealed final instrument, image set. At 3:18 in the morning, another file appeared, Caruso final clean. At 7:12, the source scan was marked deleted from the local system. Raymond's voice stayed smooth, but the smoothness had lost its warmth. Routine cleanup. Offices generate clean copies for reading all the time. Marin placed the tablet beside the clean will. Clean copies do not erase pressure marks from wax that should have existed. Leo looked at Malcolm. Who opened the safe that night? Malcolm did not answer immediately, and that hesitation hurt more than speed would have. It sounded like an old servant choosing truth over the habit of protecting a powerful house. The safe access log requires 2 authorized holders, Malcolm said. For that entry, it records Victor Caruso and Raymond Sloane. Victor folded his hands. We opened the safe to prepare the estate materials. That is not improper. Leo glanced at the burned scrap, then at the clean will, then at the cold hearth. Opening the safe is one fact. Scanning a sealed instrument after midnight is another. Printing a clean version before dawn is another. Deleting the source scan is another. Finding a burned piece of the original in my fireplace is another. Nina made a small sound, almost too quiet to count. Raymond turned toward her sharply. Miss Vale, do not speak without counsel. Leo looked at him then. Interesting advice from the man who let her say draft waste before anyone examined the ash. Willow leaned into Grace and whispered, Clean paper goes on the table.
Grace bent closer.
What, baby? Willow pointed not at the will, but at Nina's gray folder. The lady said that, when I was behind the chair, she said only clean paper goes on the table, and nobody would know because the burned one was gone. Nina closed her eyes. Victor shook his head with careful sadness. A child repeating noise from a frightening day. Leo's voice stayed low.
No.
A child remembering a sentence adults thought was safe because she was small. Marin opened the metadata tied to Caruso Final Clean and compared the spacing against the burned fragment. There is a removed clause block on page 3, she said. The missing space is consistent with the size of the guardianship language on the fragment. Grace's hand tightened once on Willow's shoulder, then relaxed, because she would not let fear teach her child to shrink. Leo picked up his pocket watch and closed it. The click was clean and final. They did not burn the will because it was useless, he said. They burned it after it became useful. Raymond's face stiffened. You are making accusations before a court has ruled. Leo looked toward the fireplace where the ribbons still waited in the stone seam. Then I will build the road to court one stone at a time. I want the full safe log, the hallway camera, the printer record, the visitor list after the funeral, and every document disposal invoice generated in the last 72 hours. Victor's voice lowered. Leo, do not let grief turn blood into suspicion. Leo faced him fully.
No, uncle.
I am letting evidence tell me which blood learned how to lie. Leo Caruso did not raise his voice after he asked for the records, and that was what made the library more afraid of him. Anger would have given Raymond Sloan something to label later, something to call grief, pressure, or emotional judgment. Leo gave him timestamps instead. He ordered a side table cleared and had the burned fragment, the clean will, the registry book, Marin Shaw's notes, the photograph of the black ribbon, and his father's pocket watch placed in a straight line beneath the tall library windows. Then he turned to the independent attorney and said, Grace Reed answers no question without counsel present. Willow answers none at all. Grace looked down at her daughter, and Willow pressed her ash-stained fingers into the side of her mother's dress. Not because she was being asked to prove anything now, but because someone had finally told the room she did not have to. The first file came from the safe access system. Malcolm Voss read it aloud in a voice that carried no drama, only record. Safe opened at 11:58 in the evening. Authorized holders: Victor Caruso and Raymond Sloan. Safe closed at 12:14. Victor folded his hands in front of him. We prepared estate materials. That is all. Leo nodded once. Then the materials should have gone to this table, not that fireplace. The hallway camera arrived next on a secure tablet. Marin logged the file number before anyone viewed it, then turned the screen. So the council members, the attorney, and the 2 staff witnesses could see. The corridor outside the library appeared in gray light after the funeral guests had left. The lamps low, the service entrance still, the house too quiet for anyone to hide behind confusion. At 12:21, Victor entered the frame carrying a thick envelope sealed at the flap. His face was not fully clear, but his gold ring caught the light when he opened the library door. At 12:32, he came out with no envelope. 11 minutes later, Nina Vale entered through the side service door with the same gray folder pressed against her chest that she was holding in the room now. Willow leaned against Grace and whispered, That is the gray folder from the chair. Raymond turned sharply toward the child, but Leo lifted one hand. She is not testifying, he said. She is noticing what the camera already shows. Nina lowered her eyes to the gray folder as if it had become heavier than paper. Marin looked at the screen. An unlogged estate folder entered through a service door after midnight. Raymond's voice tightened. Clerks carry files. That is not unusual. The printer record came in next from Raymond's office server. It showed Caruso Final Clean printed at 3:18 in the morning, once from Raymond's secure profile and once from a shared clerk terminal. Nina looked at Raymond, waiting for protection that did not come. Raymond said, Shared terminals are used by staff. If there was an improper print, I was not necessarily present. Something changed in Nina's face then. Not confession, not forgiveness, but the quiet shock of realizing she had been brought into the room as someone else's exit. Leo saw it before Raymond could turn the room against her. Miss Vale gets separate counsel before another word is asked of her, Leo said. Victor released a disappointed breath. Leo, this is morning confusion. People worked late. Documents moved. A child found Ash. And now everyone is turning office disorder into betrayal. The visitor list arrived before Leo answered. It showed that after the last guest signed out, only 5 non-resident names remained linked to the estate wing. Raymond Sloan, Nina Vale, 2 security staff, and a document disposal driver scheduled for early morning pickup. The final record followed seconds later, an invoice from a private document disposal service, created at 6:40 in the morning, before Raymond ever placed the clean will on the table. The service description read estate draft cleanup, emergency pickup. Marin placed the invoice beside the registry book. A cleanup ordered before the document was presented, she said. The library seemed to shrink around the table. Grace kept her head high, but her hand trembled once on Willow's shoulder. Willow noticed and covered her mother's fingers with both of her small hands. Leo looked from the safe log to the camera still, from the printer record to the invoice, from Raymond to Victor. A child does not have to prove a crime, he said. Adults have to explain why the evidence followed them. Raymond looked toward Nina again, but the independent attorney had already moved closer to her. Victor began to speak, and Leo stopped him with one glance. We are going back to the library table where you meant to read the clean lie, Leo said. Every piece of ash, wax, ribbon, paper, camera, print log, visitor record, and invoice sits beside it. He picked up the sealed photograph of the burned fragment, then looked at his uncle. And this time, Victor, blood does not get to stand in front of the truth. The Caruso library looked different when everyone returned to the long oak table, not because the furniture had changed, but because the room could no longer pretend the clean will was the only thing with authority. Leo Caruso stood beside the cold fireplace, close enough to the hearth that the fresh ash, the burned ribbon, and the maintenance notice felt like silent witnesses. He did not sit at the head of the table. He let the table belong to the evidence. Marin Shaw placed each item in order with gloved hands. The burned fragment sealed in a clear sleeve, the photograph of the black ribbon trapped in the stone seam, the registry book open to the final entry, the clean will inside its own sleeve, the safe access log, the scan deletion record, the file labeled Caruso final clean, the printer log, the hallway camera still, the visitor record, and the document disposal invoice marked estate draft cleanup, emergency pickup. 2 police officers stood near the library doors, quiet and observant. The independent attorney stood beside Grace Reed, not behind her, and that small placement changed more in the room than any speech could have. Family council members sat along one side, pale and stiff. Staff witnesses stood near the shelves until Leo looked at the empty chairs and said, "Sit." No one moved at first. Staff in the Caruso house did not sit during family business. Then Malcolm Voss lowered himself into one chair, and the others followed. Grace remained standing until the independent attorney gently touched the back of a chair and said, "Miss Reed, this room includes you." Grace sat slowly, like the chair was something she had been allowed to dust for years but never allowed to trust. Willow stood beside her mother's knee with her hands folded in front of her dark blue dress. The ash was still under her fingernails, but Leo had already made it clear no one would turn that into a question. Raymond Sloan adjusted his tie and found the voice he used in courtrooms and boardrooms. Until a probate court rules otherwise, the document I presented remains the operative instrument. A damaged fragment, however emotional, does not replace formal process. Victor Caruso nodded with heavy dignity. Leo, this family needs stability. Blood keeps a house steady when grief shakes it. Leo did not answer them yet. He looked at Marin. She opened her report and read with the calm precision that had slowly stripped the room of excuses. The burned fragment contains partial Caruso lion wax, blue ink consistent with the registered sealed instrument, and an embossed registry number matching the Caruso archive. The clean document lacks wax pressure, ribbon compression, and registry embossing. The seal image is flat, consistent with reproduction from a scan. Raymond's thumb rubbed the table edge. Marin continued. The scan log shows a sealed Caruso instrument captured after midnight before the funeral. A file named Caruso Final Clean was created and printed at 3:18 in the morning. The source scan was deleted at 7:12. A document disposal invoice was created before the clean will was presented. Malcolm turned the registry book toward the council. The original was not merely signed. It was sealed, ribbon-bound, and register-marked. That is how this family identifies a controlling will. Leo lifted the clean will in one hand and held it near the sealed, burned fragment without letting them touch. One paper is perfect because it was made to be seen, he said. One paper is damaged because someone tried to make sure it would never be seen again. Nina Vale sat apart from Raymond now, her own counsel beside her, the gray folder finally resting on the table instead of against her chest. Raymond tried to look at her, but Leo spoke before he could shape the room around blame. Miss Vale will speak through separate counsel. No one here uses the lowest employee in the chain as the place where the story ends. Grace looked up at that, and for one breath her face showed how well she understood being placed low so powerful people could stand clean above her. Leo turned toward her. Grace Reed is not under suspicion for stealing, hiding, or influencing estate documents. The surviving language names her as emergency estate guardian and protector during transition. Raymond's voice sharpened. A maid cannot be elevated over blood by a scrap. Victor's mask thinned at last. Blood decides this family, he said. Not a maid's scrap. Willow moved 1 inch closer to Grace. That was all. Leo saw it, and the room saw him see it. He placed the burned fragment at the center of the table. A burned truth is still heavier than a clean lie, he said. Then he looked at the police, the independent attorney, the council, and the staff sitting where they had never been invited to sit before. The reading is suspended. The clean will is challenged. The evidence is sealed. And before anyone leaves this library, this house will learn the difference between blood and proof. The difference between blood and proof did not need to be shouted, because by then it was lying in clear sleeves across the oak table. Leo Caruso stood beside the cold fireplace while Marin Shaw sealed the burned fragment, the black ribbon photograph, the registry confirmation, the maintenance notice, the scan deletion record, the file record for Caruso Final Clean, the printer log, the hallway camera still, the visitor record, and the document disposal invoice into one evidence packet. The clean will Raymond Sloan had tried to read was placed in a separate sleeve. No longer a final command, no longer the voice of the dead, only a polished page waiting to be challenged. Leo turned first to the independent attorney. File an emergency petition in probate court today, he said. The estate is preserved until the true instrument is verified. No transfer, no sale, no trust amendment, no account change, no safe access, and no family council vote under the clean will. Victor Caruso's face hardened, but he still tried to wear the shape of an elder wounded by disrespect instead of a man trapped by evidence. You would freeze your own family because of Ash? Leo looked at the sealed fragment. I am freezing the estate because Ash told the truth better than a perfect page. He turned to the council secretary and the head of security. Victor Caruso is removed from safe access, estate accounts, transfer authority, document rooms, and family council votes until the investigation is complete. Victor took a slow breath. Leo, think carefully. Leo did not look away. I am. That is what frightens you. Raymond stepped forward, but one police officer near the door lifted a hand. Not threatening, only reminding the room that titles had stopped being shields. Leo faced Raymond next. Your document, your printer log, the deleted scan record, the disposal invoice, the registry mismatch, and Marin Shaw's report will be sent to the appropriate disciplinary board and to the investigators handling the probate filing. Raymond's professional calm finally looked thin enough to tear. Nina Vale sat apart from him with her own counsel, the gray folder open in front of her instead of pressed against her chest. Leo looked at her, then at Raymond, then at Victor. Miss Vale will give her statement through separate counsel. No one in this room will use the lowest employee in the chain as the place where the story ends. Grace Reed lifted her eyes then, because she knew what it meant to be placed low so the powerful could remain clean. Leo turned toward her fully. "Grace Reed," he said, using her full name slowly enough for the family council, the staff witnesses, the attorneys, and the police to hear it. "You are not accused of stealing, hiding, influencing, or interfering with estate documents." The independent attorney placed a written acknowledgement before Grace. Leo continued, "The surviving language names you as emergency estate guardian and trust protector during transition, pending probate court verification. Until the court rules, you will have independent counsel paid from the estate, access to the records needed to defend the true instrument, protection from retaliation, and the right to accept or decline any role after receiving advice that does not come from my family." Grace did not touch the paper at first. Her hand stayed in her lap, trained by years of dusting tables she was never invited to use. Willow stood beside her chair, looking down at her own hands. Ash still sat in the tiny lines around her fingernails. "Can I wash now?" she asked. The question was so small that the great library seemed ashamed of how long it had made a child hold dirt so adults would believe her. Leo took out his white handkerchief with the black border, the same one that had first carried the burned truth, and offered it without touching her hand. "Yes," he said. "You held the peace. Now we hold the truth." Willow looked to Grace for permission. Grace nodded, and only then did the child take it. Later, when the evidence packet was sealed, when Victor's access no longer opened a single door, when Raymond's document was marked challenged, and when the probate filing had begun, Leo ordered a simple frame placed on the library table. Inside was a copy of the surviving line: "Grace Reed shall hold emergency estate guardianship during transition." Grace sat in the chair she had once only dusted, her name written into the official record in front of people who had tried to make her invisible. Willow leaned against her mother with clean hands folded in her lap. She had not saved the Caruso family by being powerful. She had kept one burned piece of truth long enough for the adults to stop pretending fire could erase it.